Hello and welcome to Ice on Ice. Tonight is a game of D&D set in the world of Behemoth, a world lost in a perpetual Stone Age, a world lost in a perpetual age of spiritualism, superstition, and strange eldritch magic. We start off in a broad flats. It is muddy. There are deltas of thin, briny streams of water flowing throughout the area. The sky is gray, cloudy. The sun is hidden. At the edge of your vision on the horizon are sheer mountains. They are not made of stone, however, these mountains. They are made of the bones of great beasts that once walked the land. And now they reside sunken in the earth. The rib cages, pelvises, jawbones, all thrust into the air, weathered by the elements, eroding but timeless nonetheless. And in this mud flats, where the water is still, black feathers fly in the sky. A huge gathering of ravens flies overhead. They look down, these ravens, and there is no corpse laid in front of them. Instead, the whole village is here, the village of Hanged Hill, a village on the frontiers of the river kingdoms of the Behemoth world. They mourn today, but no corpse is offered to the Raven Bride herself. Instead, they lay furs, dried adobe, and other pieces of driftwood, perhaps, forming a great pyre that towers heads higher than any person. And as they anoint their sacred stick with the grease fat of animal, it is set ablaze as a torch. And so too does this pyre alight. It is bright and it is hot. And the five of you stand here amongst the other villagers of Hanged Hill. This is a funeral by proxy. A funeral in which is truly the most tragic one. Funeral without a corpse. A weathered woman stands. She stands in front of the pyre, and the wind blows the smoke to envelop her and wreathe her in a cloak of soot and smoke. And she does not even cough. But the smoke would hit your nostrils and hit your lungs and would burn. But this fire is sacred fire. And she hums. And she sings using a throat song of the people. A throat song which has been carried throughout the generations. A song that is a dirge, a eulogy, and a mournful one. She mourns the loss of yet another young woman lost to the great elder trees far to the west. Her name, the lost one, is Adila, you would know, as you make it out in the song. And as the sun lowers in the sky, though barely visible, and a dusk crawls over the world, the only point of light becomes this great pyre, now a long, slow-burning fire, rather than a great raging one. And the other villagers begin to agitate, if that's the best word to use here. They begin to stir. They begin to talk amongst one another. As the wise woman, the bone grinder, the one who gave this eulogy, Amudak, she gathers everyone to come stand in a circle around her. Come, come. And one by one, the other villagers begin to form a large circle around her. How about Tulka? How are you in this funeral scene?
Tulka is towards the back, hidden, not like behind anything, but just in the shadows where people wouldn't see her, knowing that her presence is probably not very well welcome here at this time. But this was a funeral for someone she considered a friend, a very good friend. And so she could not be here. And so she stands there quietly in the far back, trying not to be noticed.
This fire is a bonfire, a guide to help her wayward soul back to us. But there is a brief chance that she may live. It is our sacred duties to bring her back. And she protrudes from a great stomach sack, like the stomach of an elk, dried and leathered and tanned and worked to be a great bag. It looks to have a lot of heft to it. She brings it in front of her. She undoes the cord and begins to pull various odds and ends out of this sack. You see a long, weathered piece of femur carved into it, elegant and ornate scrimshaw and runes. Next, she protrudes painted stones, which she lays next to this femur. And next, a piece of bark. And next, a seashell. And next, after that, a slender twig. And after that still is a large tooth of a wolf. And she continues until 12 or more of these objects are removed from the bag. She beckons to you, Amaruk. You, come. You shall cast the stones. As with these stones, we shall see who goes.
Maruk's head will tilt slightly to the side, like a curious dog at being called out by this witch. But he'll take a couple steps forward, like gliding with this like eerie smoothness, like he doesn't seem to move with his legs. They just seem to like hover above them as if by magic. But as he approaches, he'll just kind of give a nod. As you say. And he'll kind of like look down at the bonfire. And he won't shirk away from it, but there will be kind of a look of like discomfort across his face. Like fire is such a harsh way to mourn. Like the cold and wet is so much more comforting to him. Yet he knows that as his duty, as one of the bone grinders, that it is not for him to decide how the traditions of the people will be honored, and he will not voice his concerns or nor show them on his face.
Everyone gather round. The great Namer shall decide for us. And all of the townspeople stir even more so, gathering in a tighter and tighter circle around Amudak, the bone grinder, this elderly woman. And as this circle tightens, she casts a bit of powder. It's fine and a bit yellowish into the bonfire behind her. And as it connects, the flame turn emerald and teal and crimson and magenta. And the fire roars higher, though does not make more noise, nor does it make more heat. But now it shines a brilliant spectrum of colors. It resembles the aurora borealis, this fire, though it dances in a way that the aurora does not. And so, Uruk, do you join in on the circle?
Absolutely, yeah. And Uruk is... Sorry, you go.
Oh no, that would be saying, I would be asking someone else. So yeah, you can go ahead. Keel,
Yeah.
continue.
So Uruk would be gesticulating widely with his arms and hands, maybe chanting quietly at first, as the brightness of the fire and the colors of it sort of change to look like the aurora, and he, with his own station as a bone grinder, this is one of the things that he ritualistically does every day with his own campfire. So he might not even realize that he's doing it at first, sort of manipulating the flames and their brightness and color, but then realizes that it was actually bone grinder Amudak and the powder and the power that she's performing that's actually doing it this time. He realizes that he's just standing there doing the motions, but not having any effect on the fire at this point. It's out of his control.
You realize, Uruk, that the other people are also chanting and humming and stomping their feet or otherwise making a similar rhythm as you. Whether they were joining you or you were joining them, you can't quite understand nor remember. But it is now in the moment you feel it all. Tarlok, you see this circle of people tightening around this bone grinder as the ceremony comes to a peak, a summit. What do you do? Do you join the circle or do you remain on the periphery?
Tarlok wipes away a single tear that has been rolling down his cheek for some time. He is stroking 3 strands of different colored hair, shakes his head in agreement, and walks forth and joins, knowing that whatever is ahead must be dealt with accordingly.
I missed a small portion of what you had said there to do internet cuttings and outs. Essentially, was it I heard the cool lead up to it. Did you say that you advanced into the circle or shied away from it? Okay.
Yes,
Yep.
yeah. No, I advance.
And Norin, how about you?
Norn is staying mostly on the edge, his fingers messing with the piece of bark that was left in place of his sister. And he's looking into the circle and looking at the fire, hoping that the name chooser will pick him to go on this.
And then so, Amaruk, you were handed the elk stomach bag, and Amudak has replaced these trinkets back inside it. And you can feel her hands shake, not through fear or nervousness, but through just sheer age. Her hands are shaky on yours as they kind of hold your hands on the bag. It is your time. Cast these. Amaruk, sorry, oh my goodness. I'm stumbling over words. That was to you, Jeff.
Oh, sorry. I
Yeah, no
thought
worries.
I heard someone else's name in there. Yeah, seeing the bag prepared, the spell, ready to be cast. He would reach his hand in to the bag, pulling out whatever is necessary to cast the first of these and see what must be done.
And as the contents spill out, as you toss them onto the ground, some sink into the mud and others find purchase on small pebbles or stones. And as the results are revealed, this elder bone grinder, she kind of reels back, her eyes rolling back into her head, and you see that her pupils dilate fully as her eyes return. She breathes in this thick smoke and looks down upon the castings. The one named Tulka, step forward. You have been chosen. The one named Norin, you have been chosen. Step forward. She breathes in and then again. He coughs on the smoke. The one known as Urok, step forward. The one named Tarlok, and Amaruk. It is you. You have been named. And she collapses a bit, not fully onto the ground, but her body is much fatigued by this. What do you do as your name has been called by this soothsayer?
Urok would step forward instantly when his name is called, confidently and firmly, and look with a directness at the other four that join him as they're called out. And then at the end, when the elder bone grinder Amudak's legs sort of buckle, he's near enough to her to help sort of catch her and hold her up a little as he breathes in the smoke and tries to resist coughing himself and assesses the other four standing with him.
Yeah, Tulka would wait for all of the names to be said, and then she would start approaching, a look of kind of shock and also a smidgen of joy, but that's not really the right word, but more like vindication that she knew she would be called. And as she approaches the people around in the circle, those in the back there would look at her, and it's almost like they part, but not with reverence, but more of a kind of a disgust as she passes through them to the center of the circle where the bone grinder is now in Urok's arms.
Tarlok takes the 3 strands of hair, kisses each one, says under his breath the names of those 3 strands that belong to his wife and 2 daughters, puts them in a small little pouch and in his pocket next to his heart, and shakes his head, knowing that they will have their revenge no matter what. and steps forward gladly.
Norin lets go of the bark piece that he has around his neck, and he walks forward with a smile. Like I said, he was wanting to get picked, and it was mostly to get his sister back, and if he couldn't do that, he'd certainly put a bunch of pain onto whatever it was that took her. And people do part to let him through, but it isn't out of any sort of feeling that they have towards him. It's more that the clothing that he has worn for this particular ceremony has been laced with behemoth bone spikes, and nobody wishes to get cut or pierced.
Amrok is already positioned next to the woman, so he doesn't have to move to join in with the others. They've gathered around him, but he'll just kind of like look, take stock of the other four that have been chosen, see what they're made of, peering into them or as if through them, even with these like strange eyes that don't seem to like shine the same way that other people's do. But he'll just give a nod. It is to be done, then it will be done. Such is the laws of the people, and such is my own. He'll just kind of give a deep nod to this woman, seeing his own name come up, masking the surprise that he feels deep down at having been chosen and forced into this.
And so the ceremony retires as the villagers descend back across many hills, following a great river back to the village of Hanged Hill. The bone grinder stays at the pyre, however. She tends to it late into the night. She tells you it was best to go at dawn, for in the darkness of the moon holds the great evils. Collect your belongings and collect yourselves. It is a great honor the Namer has given you. And so the next day comes as a early dawn breaks on the horizon over a great sea, an endless sea that stretches on to eternity. Its briny waves wrath into the misting in the air. The village of Hanged Hill is a coastal village, and it was a relatively peaceful one, except for in the recent generations, the tree line is visible. And for this, the villagers have grown more and more fearful. A dread has been slowly building up in the minds of the people. And so the five of you are beckoned to go past that tree line into the dark forest. You've gathered your things, and you hear many gossipings or even discussings in the villagers as they make glances at you, watching you depart the village with your gear and whatever things you may take with you. Are there any things that any of you would like to do before you set off into the dark forest to search for the fate of Adila?
Norin is going to go to his home, and he's going to take the spikes that he's been carving to give himself more of a prickly outer shell, and he is going to be affixing them to what seems to be a very shoddy leather vestment and strips of leather that would just go down his arms.
Do any other characters have any morning plans before setting off?
Urok will do his rather eccentric daily routine or sort of compulsions, I suppose, which begin just before dawn, or maybe an hour or two before dawn, so that he can get them all done by first light if they're heading off in early. And that'll involve, sort of more ritualistic chanting and dancing and playing with fire and water and manipulating them around him, sort of preparing himself for the day and doing his sort of grounding, as it were, ready to set out.
And as part of these rituals, when you dance with the fire and the water, it's a time when you take a sip of tea. A tea that's not brewed with leaves or with herbs, but with a thick paste extracted from the large bones of behemoths. This is the marrow of behemoth. And you have brewed it and treated it in many, many ways. Weeks-long treatments and ointments you've done to this marrow, when finally its last process is to mix it with hot water and imbibe it yourself. And when you do, you can see the world around you is but a small world. As your mind elevates, you can see fish made of water swimming around you, birds made of fire flying high above. You can even see perhaps your father or your grandfather watching down upon you from a great mountaintop, smiling and nodding, or perhaps with a different kind of sentiment. What you've done, Urok, is you have visited the Aurora, a place where spirits linger, a place that can only be seen or entered by drinking the tea of behemoths. And this is customary for you. This is how you get your magic. This is how you can call upon these spirits to aid you. You can call upon the fish of water, the birds of fire, or whatever things in between you need.
And the familiar relief washes through Urok as he sees these otherwise unseen fish made of water, the bird made of fire, and his grandfather nodding solemnly at him from a mountain top, because he knows within him somehow that he feels safest while he's in touch with the Aurora, because when he's not, he's felt in recent years, and it's grown stronger, this dire dread feeling that something almost evil dwells within him, and when that veil between him and the Aurora weakens, that's when he fears it the most. So he's in most control while he's in this state, and he's ready for the day and for this task.
When Tulka wakes up, she is already mostly prepared. She is already packed. She hasn't got very much belongings, and they were already ready, almost as if she was going to head on this regardless of who was called. But she spends the morning making a paste of clay and dirt. And then she puts it all over her arms and her face in kind of a pattern such that she resembles the lands around her, becomes one with the nature. And when she is ready, she leaves her little hovel of a tent and heads to the others.
Tarlock has a shrine at his house for remembering his dead wife, Inyu, his daughter, Kayla, and his other daughter, Leilu. What was left of the monstrosities that killed them, a necklace, some strands of hair. He prays to that. He prays to his wife, his daughters, to give him the strength to go on during the day, to give him protection, to help with wounds that he has been inflicted with, to even have his strikes strike true and with a swiftness that will ultimately kill those that oppose him. After he does that, he grabs his best arrows and his gear and walks out the door.
And as a monster slayer, a witch hunter, so to speak, you know one thing that most others don't in your time pursuing the evils on the borders of the woods. You know of the sacredness of salt. And this is something that bone grinders would be able to say, but you know it for its truth. You know how salt burns the flesh of the wicked. You know how it peels their skin from their bones. You know how it burns the very branches and bits of tree away and causes them to wither and die. And you probably have your best arrows. Some of them have been laced with thick crystals of salt that you've extracted and boiled away from the seawater and collected over your many months or years as a witch hunter. And then the five of you have gathered at the edge of the village. You can see the side glances of the villagers. They seem wary. They seem a bit uneasy. Nor is there any confidence in their eyes, especially when they eye upon Tulka joining you.
Tulka keeps her head up high and proud as she walks towards where the others are, ignoring the looks of the other people, the villagers.
Amaruk, you notice today the skies are clear. Not many clouds hang in the sky. And the sun shines bright, though low in the sky.
Yeah, to him, to most people, this would be a blessing. Clear skies and bright sun are what illuminate, allow us to see, and allow us to move. But to him, it's like this strange disconnect of all the spirits that he connects with. It's those of the storm and the rain that he feels the most strong. So it's like this simultaneous, irreconcilable feeling of relief at the easy journey, and yet this sort of cosmic loneliness at the disconnect from him and the rest of his spirits that he normally communes with. But he'll leave that out, ignore the feeling for now, knowing that business must come first, and that his personal feelings are irrelevant. But he'll look over to Tulka first of all and say, "Do not let their stares grieve you, nor cause you any distress. You've been
Sorry, Jeff, you just cut out on me.
Yeah, I lost him too.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Am I back?
Yep. Good now.
Yeah, Emmerich would. I don't know where I cut out and how much you heard of that. But
You were just going to talk to her. You said, don't let their stares grieve you, and then it cut out.
yeah, he would continue.
Seems we have a bit of internet gremlins happening. Because as you repeated yourself, you cut out again.
I blame the trees.
The trees seem to silence us.
I always knew they were up to no good.
Their whispers are deafening indeed.
It's the omen.
So, Jeff, if you'd like to try again, and hopefully third time is the charm, you may. And if not, then we will assume that something he said was very wise and very reassuring, or maybe even a bit cryptic.
Oh no, have we lost him?
Jeff, if you're talking, you muted your mic.
Curse the trees and curse the darkness.
The trees and their internets.
Darn, son, needed it to be stormy.
I cast protection from internet gremlins.
Yeah. And so you stand on top of this hanged hill, and it is a name which is true. It is a village that sits upon a cliff that has a windy, descending path down to the ocean shoal, where the rocks and the driftwood lie in shambles, where marine life can be harvested. It's the closest thing that exists in this world to farming. For agriculture is not a thing yet to pass into this society, but fishing and harvesting shelled sea animals is the closest thing we'll have. As they harvest Sedna's bounty from the seas. But Hanged Hill atop this cliff offers a great vantage. A vantage where you can see the surrounding miles. And where you would normally see more flatlands, where you can see the place where the funeral took place last night, and where the flatlands seem to end as your eyes drift westward. And in the place of just mudded flatland, I say the word flatland here a lot, is a great swath of greenery, a carpet of trees, and it extends farther than the eye can see. They stick out of the mud, their thick, gnarly trunks, and their long, bony pine needles wavering in the wind. It's a place where none dare tread. For treading within this forest is suicide. For darkness beyond what your mind can understand, what people can even tell in stories, lurks within these forests. And we will take a brief bio break to let Jeff catch up with his internet. So you can go ahead and fill up your water glasses, visit the washroom, take a smoke, whatever you need to. We'll be back in 5 minutes or so.
And so begins our journey.
I'm really hoping Norrin gets to grab some things. Did I put what his subclass was there? I did. Okay. He's covered in spikes. He will hug people to death.
Woot!
And so we return to the world of ice and snow.
Did Jeff come back? I guess not.
Nope, looks like he's still
I
in the
don't
midst
see him.
of hammering his internet back together.
So rough. I know them feels. I dropped, I think, 3 times my last session last week.
Ooh.
So frustrating.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So far,
the last few days I've been having really bad internet issues with like games. In so fact, like I hate just like, oh, hey, can you repeat that? Because it cut out for me. What I would just do is like try to piece together what people said, based off the brief clips of audio that I got to get through. It was more of a mind puzzle than anything else, trying to figure out what people said and to respond accordingly.
I could imagine. My God, I've always, since I got this up and running. I mean, this whole internet thing, new experience for me since like April. I've had for the new computer and the mic and the the camera and stuff. I had a 2009 Lenovo laptop, Yep. Not going to be online. But no, lately, well, not lately. I mean, every about 9 o'clock-ish, my internet goes kind of wonky. So I don't know. So far, it's been good with online stuff. So no, lately, well, not lately. I mean,
Yeah, it's I get that, like the same like high traffic time too happens
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah, here it happens like almost like clockwork at about 5 o'clock, and then another bubble at like 9 or so.
Oh,
So,
yeah. I think that's universal. It sounds like.
probably just there's so many people on the internet at the same time.
Yeah. Got a Snapchat.
Yeah, gotta snap those chats.
Yeah. Tweet those tweets. Well, I'm glad this game is working out, man.
If
So far,
it got past the scheduling part of it, which
right?
is-
Always the hardest part. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter if you're fighting a Tarrasque. Scheduling is always the most difficult thing.
Scheduling is the eternal enemy.
Right. With anything almost. Gaming's the worst.
Yeah, I really dig this setting, and I like the roles, like the societal roles that you've outlined. Just helps sort of immediately anchor characters, or even from character concept phase, can sort of build them up with that in mind. I found it really cool so far.
And so it seems as if the bone grinder Amaruk has had a rougher morning than would be understood, as he is unable to join you, but perhaps he will catch up later. Jeff has essentially given us the green light to keep going until his internet gets back on track again. We'll just have him. He'll run and catch up to us if he gets back on.
We'll
Yeah,
rub a
I always
lamp
say-
up here.
Like I say, technology is great when it works.
In that case, if I may, Uruk would, if I may speak into the sort of gap that Amaruk started, upon seeing this tree line and these dread-inducing forests, that feeling, that very human feeling of dread that overcomes anybody who looks upon them, or even the people in the village, when they merely think about the forest, and especially how it's been encroaching in recent generations. That overcomes Uruk, even in the state that he's in touch with the Aurora. And he looks over to Tulka and maybe sees that the villagers were giving her sort of skeptical looks or uncertain looks. And he says to her, "Will be my first time too into the forests, young one. We will step in there together, and I'm sure we will step back out. Fear not."
I will make it so. You will be fine with me. She looks at you all confident like, and you're a little bit unsure of exactly what the deal is with her. But she turns and says, "They will know my worth when we complete this and we are successful. Then they will see that I was right in what I did."
And he looks down at you. He's a tall man, maybe head and shoulders above you in height, looks down at you as you say this confidently to him, and a little sideways smile comes upon his face, of almost a kind of pride, and he looks at you, seemingly seeing things that that you can't see upon yourself or around yourself, and he says, "Then they will see what I see. So it will be done. Shall you lead the way?"
And
Young Tulka.
she looks up at you, gives you a smile. Yes, let us go. And with that, she would proceed down the path towards the trees.
The thing you note is that there is no path towards the trees, because that would imply that people would walk towards these trees willingly. Instead, you could probably find perhaps a river that winds its way down, even like settling in some kind of pool, lake, pond at the base of this hill that you're upon. And use that as your guide.
Yeah, absolutely. She would find that river, that little stream, whatever trickle there is, the little break it's going to make in those trees, and that is where she would at least start to head.
And so as this tense mile comes to an end, you face a precipice, all four of you. You can see where the underbrush begins. You can see where the quiet, still earth, muddied and soft, becomes a densely green undergrowth. This is the tree line, and you stand within 5 feet of it. And your hairs stand on end on the backs of your necks, on your arms, even everywhere. It just, this almost as electricity kind of hangs in the air, but it's not a stormy day. You can see it above. The skies are clear. Who crosses? Who takes their first step into the forest?
Norin will say, "I am of the Thor," and he will step forward first.
And he's eaten alive! No, you hear the cracks of branches as you break them underfoot, as you crush them with your strides. And almost the moment that you take your first strides into this forest, you hear movement, perhaps even a few shouts coming from behind you, as Amaruk descends the hill, perhaps a few minutes behind you, having gathered his things a bit untimelier than the rest of you. As it seems Jeff has returned to the game, thankfully.
Yeah, Amarok will approach the others, and give like the most minuscule of head nods over to the others and just say, "My apologies for the delay. It seems that I was held up for a moment longer than expected. I am here. We should go."
Norin, the echoes of your footsteps and the twig snaps and the dried leaves and pine needles being crushed underfoot, they echo. They cause this eerie sound to wave throughout the forest. You get a sense for how profoundly deep this forest is. How in these few strides it has become very dark. For none of the sun's light seems to reach the forest floor. There's only a few, maybe seldom pillars of light tiny little cracks and an otherwise completely sealed ceiling of canopy. But beyond your footsteps, it is silent within this forest.
Norin would reach down to his side, and his hand would grip onto a battle axe that he has carved from behemoth bone in a way that's very similar to the spikes that he has inlaid into his clothing. It seems very jagged and rough, and like it definitely was not professionally done, if that's a way to put it.
And who is the second to take their first strides into the dark forest?
Tarlok waits for Urok, knowing that what lies ahead is danger, but danger always doesn't come from the very beginning of things. It's what sneaks up behind you is the worst. Probably has chased one or two, maybe more, into this forest. So he patiently waits as he reaches in the back of his quiver and knocks an arrow. Just ready. Doesn't pull it back, but gives a nod.
Urok nods back to Tarlok in kind. Witch Hunter, you will watch our backs. He says that more as a statement rather than a question. Not a command, but just an acknowledgement that that's what you're going to be doing. And he nods and turns to Amaruk, his fellow bone grinder in this company. His eyes pass across Amaruk and then fall upon young Talker, who he spoke with earlier, who spoke of leading us through this forest and proving herself. And his gaze just lands upon Talker, and he waits.
And she's staring into the trees. And before she steps forward, she pulls out this behemoth bone bow that she has strung on her back, and she readies it. And once she is prepared, she looks at all of them, nods, and then takes the step into the tree line, past the tree line.
I need you, please, Tulka, as you step into this forest, to make a dexterity saving throw.
That would be a 23.
As you step in, your eyes, they dart back and forth, and moments before it happens, you find yourself having stopped mere seconds as a large branch seems to be directly in your path, sticking out, long and piercing and jagged, mere inches from your face, from your eye. If you had not been more careful, you would have walked into this. And this startle stops your heart for a mere moment before it continues again. As you find yourself with your breath caught in the back of your throat.
And she would take that short little inhale of surprise, as she realized what just had happened. And then she turns to the rest of them and says, "Be careful. The trees, they do not want us here. They will try to stop us." And then
And so
she would
none
walk
of you. Oh, so go ahead.
I was just saying she's going to then walk around the sharpened stake.
And none of you noticed the tree move in any sort of way. It's just as if Tulka had not quite been watching where she was going until the last second. As you step within this forest's bounds, Tulka, you feel a wave of dizziness or disorientation as the world around you spins only slightly. A sense of vertigo overcomes you, but you shake this vertigo and press forward. And so then next is Urok, correct?
Yeah, Urok will produce from a leather pouch at his waist a small token, like a carved from behemoth bone and sort of wrapped with sort of straps of leather, and it's got feathers and maybe stone beads and things on it. And he presses it to his forehead with his left hand as he draws his behemoth bone sword with his other hand, and with this token pressed to his forehead, he gestures with his sword in the air around himself, sort of encircling his own body with the behemoth bone bladed sword, and chants and casts bark skin on himself, and I'm flavouring that as behemoth bone aesthetic instead of bark. So his skin sort of becomes this sort of rough, porous, bone-like texture. So his AC will be 16 for 1 hour while he holds concentration. And then I guess he will look to his two remaining companions and then wordlessly step in as well.
And the branches crunch underfoot. It has the same feeling that upsets your stomach. It's nauseating, as if you're walking on a graveyard of bones and you're crunching skulls and finger bones beneath. But it's not skulls and finger bones that you're walking upon. It's deadwood branches. But still, it's nauseating nonetheless. Unnatural, even.
Especially with his heightened senses from being in touch with the aurora, and he gets this sort of head rush and his eyes spin a little bit, and he steadies himself, tries to adjust his eyes to the darkness within, tries to see his two companions who have already stepped in. Can he spot them?
Yes.
And he sees that Tulka already was nearly fell victim to these murderous trees, and so he squints his eyes and grits his teeth as he steps forward, keeping one eye ahead and one eye behind for the remaining two companions to enter as well.
And to complete our marching order, who goes next?
I think Amarok would look over to the other still remaining, and then through the trees where the other companions have passed. And he would say, perhaps to you, perhaps just to himself, sometimes a fearsome darkness can be better for us than a comfortable light. We do not learn in the light, we learn through exploring what cannot be seen. And thus here shall we go to find the unknown in a place beyond. Then he'll take a step into the trees, into the dark.
And likewise, you feel that same uneasy pang going through your inner core. This uneasiness comes from a deep-seated dread at your own frailty. It stirs out of almost nothingness, it seems. It's your mind somehow had wandered into this idea of you just being a single raindrop in a larger storm, insignificant. And this feeling passes, or perhaps it lingers, but it does not stop you from pressing on further. And lastly, Tarlok takes up the rear, his arrow knocked at the ready as he scans and takes up the rear. I need all 5 of you, please, to make perception checks.
Ten for Urok.
And it seems fitting that Tarlok sees this as he is the last to enter. As you step in, your eyes are keen, and you notice a figure, a shape, darting or moving in the underbrush, directly, perhaps 100 strides or so. It's on the tree line itself, and so you're able to catch a brief glimpse of whatever it was. Some 4-legged beast, tall and slender and graceful, with large antlers, bounds out and then in again into the tree line. And straddling this precipice, it eyes you, and you can see upon its head an eye in the center of its skull, as well as 2 regular deer eyes. A deer with 3 eyes looks upon you, and you see that this deer is covered in manged fur that it seems to be yellowed, and it drapes like a long cloak over it. And as you seem to strain with your eyes to get more of the detail, you realize what you saw was not a 3-eyed deer with yellow fur, but just a strange shape of branches and trees that tricked your mind for a moment into thinking something was there that really wasn't. Do you say or do anything at this sight, Tarlok?
Tarlok just nods and yeah. Keeping a weary eye on it, but doesn't say anything and continues walking forward.
And so, as you 5 descend further into the bowels of this forest, it overcomes you as you see the small light of your former entrance becomes smaller and smaller as you take stride after stride through gnarled roots, winding patches of dank earth, climbing steep hills and patches of moss grown ground. The forest remains to be silent, it seems. No bird call, no animal sounds, no wind even. And then the wind seems to pick up. But the wind is not a normal wind that breathes through the village with its mighty breath. No, it is something more visceral that breathes through this forest. It sounds like a person breathing deeply, a sigh of not resentment or sadness or resignation, but a sigh of that feeling that you feel right before you know something pleasurable will happen. A sigh of anticipation, perhaps. And Norin, you crunch underfoot. a thicker branch by accident. And this sends the sound scattering, breaking the sigh and breaking the silence, and probably even startling everyone in your company. And this snap echoes into the forest. Do you do or say anything at this?
Norn would look around to see if anything in the forest was changing before saying, "Sorry, that was me. I stepped on a wrong spot."
And Tulka would have stopped immediately and kind of spun not towards the sound that Norin had made, but in the opposite direction to see if anything was coming.
And so you turn to look, and you see nothing but just a continuous line of trees, each gnarled, each ancient, tall, foreboding. The barks are weathered and twisted, broken with age. And as you look, you see one of these trees, and it seems to stand out more so than the others. It seems to be all alone by itself, yet still surrounded by other trees. It's nonsensical to phrase it, but it still is there, and you can sense it calling to you. You can see that by its roots form great beds of moss, inviting. You feel the weariness of your legs after marching and climbing and descending and traveling down hills and through this twisted forest. Come to me. Take a rest. Come. Come to me. It whispers to you, Tulka.
And Tulka would turn to Norn and the rest of them and point out the tree and say, "It beckons. Be wary, for it wants us."
Tarlok looks, shakes his head. Nature is indeed out of balance.
Was it only Tulka who heard that whispering, as I understand it?
Yes.
Yeah. So then, as she said that it beckons to us, Urok will look around and look specifically at that tree, holding his sword in a very defensive, apprehensive way, expecting any moment for any of these trees, especially that one, to sort of lash out.
And Urok, you hear a very quiet snap, and then a thump, and then a sound of something moving through on the ground through the underbrush. And as you react to this sudden sound, something small appears by Tulka's feet as it rolls out from underneath some low shrub. A piece of fruit, ripe, split from its descent and travel, and it lands softly at your feet, Tulka. You can see the plumpness of its ripeness and the juiciness that could happen if you just took a bite.
And she looks at this fruit, to her, this vile fruit, this evil And she knows it's not her path. And she's going to step on it.
And as you step on it, it squishes like a fruit would. And as you release your boot or foot upon the fruit, you see that it is not just some sticky, juicy stuff that leaks out, but a thick red sap. It clings to your boot, and it pools, and it stains the forest floor. And you swear, in a trick of the eye or in the light, you see it thump or beat as if it were a heart before it ultimately resigns and becomes just a pulpy mess.
And she looks towards the tree and she says, "You will not have me. I am not yours." And is there anything, I should like to look at the tree. Is there anything, I mean, besides like tree-like things, anything around it that would indicate that potentially like Adila might have been this way?
You can give me either a investigation or a perception check to look at this tree and look at the tree's surroundings.
Oh, I got a nat 20, so that on my perception, so that would be a 26.
And so you do what you should have done, and you look up. You look up into the bough of this tree, and in the bough of this tree, you see its many, many leaves and many needles, each some sickly orange color, mottled with green. And you see the twisted branches, and you see there is some shadowy thing in the branches. And you can make out its form. You see 2 legs and 2 arms, outstretched, held up by these branches. And you can see, though it is dark, it resembles a person in the branches of this tree. Unmoving, but a person. But it is very little detail you can glean from this distance.
And she would reach out to Uruk. Uruk, there is a person up in the branches of that tree. I can just make them out.
He squints through the darkness. I see a form. Cannot make out the detail. And he shifts his footing and slashes with his sword up towards where the figure seems to be perched in the tree, and says, "Shift," as he casts the cantrip Gust, just trying to see if a small blast of air will sort of shift the figure, or otherwise get them to move in some way.
And so as you beckon a wind ahead of you, it causes the branches to rustle. And you can see for a brief moment that as the branches reveal, you see the figure, and you see how its wrists are impaled upon branches that seem to grow through and out them and wrap around it. You see that the branches where these wrist puncture wounds are stained with a dark red color. And you see that the ankles are done in a similar fashion, though their feet are entirely obscured. But what really makes your stomach turn is you see the body, and you see a crevice that divides the body in half from the top of the skull to the middle of the abdomen. And you see that this body is completely naked, and you see the signs of womanhood on this body, though the body itself is covered in dirt and blood. but the face is obscured. You are not able to get a glance of the face, but you do see some locks of hair, though again matted and mottled and otherwise very disgusting, hanging and mixing with the bough of the tree.
He tries not to let his stomach turn to the point where he would be retching. And he turns instantly to Norin and Tarlok, looking to see if they've noticed what he's just noticed from the gust shifting the figure and maybe giving them better visibility.
And yes, everyone would have seen the sight from this gust.
Is she doing anything?
The figure is definitely immobile, though it did groan, or not groan, it did kind of shift slightly from this gust of wind. It was not an animated movement, but just one from the wind kind of pushing and heaving its way. If the person were able to move or able to respond, it would be quite an as the person seems dead.
Okay.
Tarlok, as you look,
Go ahead.
you notice something peculiar. These corpses. Sorry, this corpse in the tree. The left half has a hair color in which one of your locks of hair is, and the other half of the head has the same color hair as another of the locks of hair that you have. Two distinct colors. One lighter and one darker.
Tarlok looks concerned. Grabs his pouch. Pulls out the 3 locks and looks at them and looks up. Are they the same color?
And they are. And as you look up and for witness this, you recognize the brutally ravaged sights of your murdered daughters. Though the left half is one daughter and the right half is the other. And you see in between them a thick network of these thin branches seem to be weaving them together, though not actively. Just kind of this, almost like this sewing being done and a slight gap between them. You notice that the daughter on the left is missing her eye, and the daughter on the right is missing her foot.
Tarlok yells out, Kayla! Leu! It's them. But they are not them. A tear starts forming in his eye as it rolls down his cheek.
Norin looks up at the half-daughters, and he's going to ask, would you like me to get them down so that they can have a proper funeral?
Yes, we must get them. They cannot live like this.
So Norin is going to attempt to climb the tree.
Make me an athletics check then, please, Norin.
That's not one.
You realize this tree, its bark is slick. And it's slick with a strange mixture of a thick sap and something that is unmistakable as blood. And you see these patches of where the bark is distended, and the flesh underneath the bark is engorged, and it's almost like the belly of a mosquito, where you can see pools of red beneath the bark. This tree is unclimbable unless you have some way to like really dig into this tree flesh and climb it. But otherwise, with your bare hands, it is too slick.
So he's going to hold his arms so that the spikes are facing towards the tree. And he's going to try and shove them in and use those as sort of makeshift climbing claws.
And so as these spikes puncture the bark, there is an acrid odor that passes to your nostrils and to the nostrils of all 5 of you, or I guess 4 others of you. Everyone can make a tradition check for me here, which is essentially an intelligence check that you might have taken proficiency in. It replaced history, I believe.
Oh, that's
That's
better
a
than I
modified
thought.
20 for me.
12.
5.
And so, Amaruk, you remember something about the trees, some legend passed down, something known as the tree curse. And it's brought to the forefront of your attention as you see Norin strike this tree. You know of the superstition of the tree curse. You know of how many have died from some ill fate after harming a tree. And when men first walked the earth and found the first tree, and they cut off its branches and made a fire with them, they all died, impaled by nothing but the wind upon the branches that they crafted, that they cleaved, and their blood soaked into the earth, and it fed a new tree to spawn from their death. And this tale has grown and created a large tradition / superstition that is now known as the tree curse, where it is believed those who harm the flesh of a tree die thereafter. And you see him sticking his behemoth spikes into the flesh of the tree. Does Rook say anything else?
Yeah, Emmerich will see the spiked man approaching, and attempting to climb it. And he'll let out a word of caution. You know, they say, whoever pierces the flesh of a tree is doomed to bleed the blood it would have let, to fall where it may have been felled. Nothing in this forest is freely given or freely taken, not even the bodies of loved ones, food, life, breath. Be aware of what you may bring upon yourself if you continue, that it may be your death and that you may hang in the trees too like they do.
We all die eventually, Bone Crusher.
Do not risk yourself. Let me make peace with this. And then we can move on if need be.
Is the body tied to the tree?
The body is supported to the tree through these impalings through the wrists and through the ankles. and that is the main way it seems to be anchored to the branches. Though a closer glance would even see that many smaller branches weave their way in and out of the flesh of these two half women, almost as if their bodies are entirely riddled, as if their veins themselves are roots, though in the air.
Is there anything that you would wish me to do to aid you along in making your peace?
Watch the others. Watch this forest. There's eyes everywhere, and no telling when those eyes will come true. I go up to the tree, pull out the strands, the two strands, kneel down, kiss them, look up at the tree, look at my two daughters. This wasn't supposed to be. You were supposed to be women. Give me grandchildren. I curse this forest. I curse these monstrosities. I will still avenge you. Each one in their own way. For all those that are living now will not see your fate, your deaths. Instead, they will have life too. I kiss the two strands, put them back in the pouch, wipe away the tears, get up and walk back to the group, knock my arrow again, and give everybody a silent nod that we can continue.
Instead of offering Tarlok some kind of consolement or words of wisdom or anything at all to Tarlok, as you would think would be the most appropriate thing to do, Urok goes over to Amaruk, his fellow bone grinder in the group, and just says directly to him, quietly, so that Norin cannot hear. He has wounded the tree. The village will not let him return. Or if they do, they will hang him. Don't know what fate may befall us before we are done with this task, but we must decide before we emerge. And ensure no more harm is done to the trees, lest the curse be amplified. And with that, he sort of kisses his little token, his little bone and leather and feathery sort of token, as some sort of superstitious protection.
People will do as their traditions and their customs must dictate, and so must we do the same for ourselves and for each other. The taint of this place will not wash away easily, especially if we bring it upon ourselves through its blood. We must watch over the others. That is our duty. We are the ones who grind the bones, who see what its marrow can teach and what it can show. It is our duty to shepherd them and to ensure that no curse befalls them, nor harm comes to them. That is what we must bear here in this place more than any other place. The consequences that come before or after will fall as they may.
People of Hanged Hill do things differently than they do over at the Grey Walk Mile. That's for certain. But as you say, This is true. And it just says matter-of-factly, perhaps we'll all be for the noose before this task is done.
Perhaps it is a kinder fate than we will meet. Only the times will say.
And he looks a little regretfully with that sentiment over to Tulka, seemingly the youngest of the group, and with a real drive to prove herself in this task. And he hopes silently to himself, if the rest of us must be hanged for necessary harm that we may do to the forest here, he hopes that that at least she can avoid such a fate. But he says nothing to Tulka. He just has those thoughts as he sort of stares at her. She might notice him looking.
Yeah, I think she'd notice you staring at her, and you have this weird look across your face, almost of pity, and or at least that's what she's reading, and she kind of takes that the wrong way, and you see her straighten up even more, and she turns to Norin and said, "You are foolish. The tree will have its flesh from you. Be wary. For now, we must go."
My sister has been taken from me by whatever resides in this forest. What else do I have to lose?
You could kill us
Your
all.
soul.
Then it will be with hers in this forest.
And I will pray for both of you.
You may
Uruk
give your
also-
own life freely, but you have no right to give ours. That is not your choice to make. So if you doom yourself, at least do us the service of doing it by yourself, so that we might not suffer the curses laid upon you. Do not be selfish or stupid. Now is not the time.
Come, let's not stay here before this tree becomes thirsty and takes its revenge. And she would turn to walk away, skirting this tree, giving it a wide berth, and very cautiously watching the roots and the ground ahead of her.
And as you walk, with your attention fixated on the ground ahead of you, you notice a certain stone sitting amongst the roots of other trees. This stone is only peculiar because it's a different color than the other stones. It is covered with a yellow moss.
Would I recognize the moss?
And only you recognize the fact that it is moss and that it is yellow.
But I have not
But
seen
otherwise, no. No.
I have not seen this moss before.
No.
She would approach the stone, this thing that's out of place here, to look at it more closely.
And this stone is a little bit larger than a fist and is laid into the ground, covered in the other detritus of fallen trees. And as you approach it, you see it there. It's at your feet. How do you interact with this stone, if at all?
I think Tulka is cautious, so she would take this little obsidian dagger that she's got in her belt pouch, and she would cautiously give it a little poke. She's not scraping it, but she's just gingerly touching it to see if the stone underneath, like if it's solid.
And so as your blade makes its way through the moss, you can see how it's like hair, this moss, as you brush it aside, and as you poke the stone, it feels brittle, and the tip of your blade pierces whatever surface of the stone there is. It's not a piercing, however, of something soft, but of something, as I said, brittle. As you hear kind of a crunch happen. Well, it's not really more of a hear, it's more of a feel. You feel it kind of crunch at the tip of your blade.
Looking around the dirt around it, the ground, I think she would carefully try to excavate it. Like go around from the outside to remove it from however it's set in the ground.
And as you carve away the earth beneath it, you see other stones covered in the same yellow moss. The stones are shaped differently, however. And as you excavate it further, you reveal 2 eye sockets in the stone, and you realize that it is not a stone, but a skull, and that the other stones in the dirt are not stones, but you see them as a collarbone, a shoulder blade, an arm bone, a bit of rib. As you discover that this is a skeleton buried in the earth here. Almost all parts of its bony exterior covered in this yellow moss, growing upon it. You cannot, however, find the jawbone. Though the other bones in that proximity of the skeleton are present.
Does the skull look human?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Amaruk, you must see this.
He'll approach, and then go to take a look.
Someone has died here. And she would hand what remains of the skull to you. And there's this strange moss growing on it. Have you seen it before?
They are not the first that has fallen to the woods, nor will they be the last. I'll say callously, but then kind of bring the skull up closer to his face to try to take a look at the moss. Not sure if there would be anything that I have any familiarity with either, but I'll try.
And yeah, this moss is probably very much outside your domain of knowledge. It does look a bit peculiar. It seems to be a bit more feathered than most mosses. It has this almost like urine yellow color to it. And it has kind of a strange odor to it when it's agitated, when it's touched. But otherwise it's not recognizable.
I'll kind of like squint at it as if looking at something like far away or far too small for eyes to see, but then kind of shake his head and look back at you. Well, some minor things of the plant life I know as they pertain to the rituals that I'm familiar with. This moss is not part of something that I'm aware of, nor is it something that I know. I think caution would be wisest.
Agreed. And Connor, you're saying that this yellow moss is only growing on the bones?
Yes, it is stark as you've never seen this yellow moss in the surrounding area. Like you might even look, and there's no other traces of this yellow moss around you. Where other mosses would be more of kind of a licheny white or a deeper green. This yellow is very distinctful, distincty.
Distinct. And what's curious is that it only seems to grow on the bones of the fallen. It grows nowhere else, and I think that is odd.
It is a curse, surely, says Urok.
Do you
A
know
grave, not even a shallow grave, simply bones strewn about the floor of this cursed place.
Have you
This
seen
surely
such a curse before? Sorry.
I've not. No, you're right. I've not seen such moss as this before. But I would not think it is best to handle these things unless this is the skeleton of the ones we seek. Should leave it be, lest the curse spread to us. And with that, he glances back over at Norin after the sort of heated words earlier. Curses already on the lips amongst this group in this cursed place.
And so who has the skull? Is it Amaruk still, or has it been handed off to Urok? Or does even Tulka have it?
Amaruk would have either set it back down onto the ground or passed it along to whoever would have taken it. So either way.
Yeah, and if Amaruk passed it back to Tulka, Tulka would have held it until Uruk said best to leave it be, and she would have placed it back down.
And as you place it down upon the ground, you put it back in its resting place. And as you stand back up, you hear a creaking and a groaning as a wind seems to pick up and bend the bough of the tree that you're standing somewhat under, though a few paces off. It creaks and groans in a way that seems pained, almost as if it's alive, but it's not alive in the way that other things are alive. And you see the skull in the resting spot. You see the roots seem to grab it as you put it back, though slowly and surely. And the skull turns of its own volition, and the skull looks up at you, Tulka. I would like you, please, well, not just you, Tulka, but everyone, please, to roll initiative checks. As the moss clings and binds itself together, and the skeleton that you've unearthed begins to stand, its bones creaking and moving from this movement in the moss. And another skeleton seems to rise further off yet, directly beneath the in the roots of that great tree. You see that bed of moss that was sitting there, though it is a different color. It seems to be a giant cloak, or some kind of shell at least, for another skeleton. Two, you see, as the second one rises from the same spot, clutched at each other, though they untwine. And now standing before you in their various spots are three of these skeletons, each draped in moss and roots. As you see the roots twist and bind around their femurs and through their rib cage and hold them together. And we'll start off with Tarlok, I believe. Yes.
All right. Since Tarlok has already have the girl's strands of hair with him, he bites down on them and begins chanting a small prayer as he knocks the arrow back. Can I do a bonus action before action?
Absolutely, yes. You can take your actions in any order on your
Okay.
turn.
At the same time, before I release the arrow, I cast Hunter's Mark on one of the skeletons. And then release my arrow.
So are you casting Hunter's Mark on the skeleton that is next to Tulka, or one of the two that are sitting near the trunk of the tree?
One of the two that are sitting next to the trunk of the tree.
All right. And so you make your attack roll.
Okay. Hold on. Give me. Where's that? There it is. Ooh, natural 20. So.
All right. That'll hit for obvious reasons.
Beep. Okay. So it's 1d8 plus 3, and Hunter's Mark does an extra d6. Okay. Um, 5 points with the arrow and 1 point with Hunter's Mark. And I'm using the salt crystal arrows, by the way.
Yes, and so you see the arrow kind of puncture into the bits of the moss that hold this skeleton together, and it cleaves through it. And you see that the salt literally burns away, causing the moss to wilt and retract a bit. And essentially, your Hunter's Mark is what I'm going to be kind of like how we're skinning the salted arrows, because there isn't really a mechanic for the salt besides some kind of magic arrows. That's how I imagine your Hunter's Mark is you've kind of drawn these anti witch arrows, and you're using them.
Awesome.
If that's okay with you. That was, you said, a total of 6 damage. You said.
Let's see. Yes.
It's
Total
5,
of 6
yeah.
damage.
All right. And so it is now the skeleton's turns to act. As Tulka, you find that some jagged bit of bone is being slashed at you, as the gnarly fingertips, though they are tipped with claws, the claws are made of roots, and they slash at you. I also got a natural 20. Okay, this is a fun one. Oh, also, you got a natural 20, by the way, last turn, which means you get to roll all your dice a second time.
Oh, crap. Okay, here.
Yeah.
Totally forgot about that.
Okay. As I also roll a critical hit.
So the second roll is 16.
Okay, so your arrow would obliterate the skeleton. So as the arrow punctures through, the salt would spread, wilting the entirety of that moss away, and it shrivels and it becomes just this desiccated wreck, as the now unenhanced pile of bones just kind of clatters softly against the dank earthen floor. And then we go back to the skeleton slashing at Tulka. It gets a total of 13 slashing damage to you from these jagged wooden tipped claw hands scratching at you in some vital place. Probably even like grabbing you right at one of the tendons holding your leg in place. One of the tendons in your legs, as it kind of just grips you and pulls you by this leg that is gripped, knocking you off balance and getting this deep rent into your leg. And lastly, the last remaining skeleton, because there's only 2 of them now, kind of shambles forth, and I'm gonna see which one it attacks here. So a die roll. That'll be Uruk. It approaches you, Uruk, and slashes at you in a similar way that it slashed at Tulka, and it got a 23 to hit, and it's going to do 6 points of slashing damage to you, Uruk. And Tulka, that brings us to you.
So Tulka would have let out a shriek as this thing rent her leg, probably her thigh, her calf. It, just destroyed the flesh on her leg, and she still has that dagger in her hand. So as a bonus action, I'd like to make an insight check against it. Against its deception. So he gets to roll deception against my insight. This is my insightful fighting.
Okay.
Oh, yay, I rolled a 2 on that. So that's a total of 6. So if you can beat a 6 on your deception.
You said a deception check. All right, well, it rolled a 15 for a total of 12 on its deception check.
So what that means is I cannot do sneak attack damage on it, but I am just going to now attack it regularly with the dagger that I have in my hand, trying to basically free myself from this grasp that it's got on my leg. Oh my goodness. No, the pain in her leg is just, it's overwhelming. That would be a 9 to hit.
And the 9 will not connect. Your blade chips away at the forearm of this creature, but it sends a bone shard flying, but otherwise doing literally nothing to it.
Yeah, her attacks are kind of wild as the pain is just blurring her vision. And that is the end for me.
Amaruk, it is now your turn. There is a corpse puppet on Tulka and one upon Uruk.
He'll look to where Tulka is next to him, seeing the fearsome blow that's already been dealt to her and her struggling. We'll just say, now is not yet our time for the forest to take us. Still yourself. Show resolve, we will be victorious. And he'll look down towards his hands, and he'll let out a long open breath, just and as he does so, the air will fog as if it were freezing cold, but it will continue to condense around in between his hands until it's this thick, waving, writhing ball of fog. And then a crackle will begin to erupt from the center of it as this bluish purple lightning will begin to streak through it as if clouds in the sky. And he'll bring his hands up towards the skeleton creature as this blast of radiant lightning will explode from his hands. For a 24 to hit.
A 24 definitely hits.
So that's going to be 18 radiant damage as this blue-purple lightning will streak from his hand into the skeletal creature, wreathing around it in spiritual energy as a guiding bolt.
The concussive force of this lightning bolt is enough to obliterate it and send the bones flying, just literally ripping them from the puppetry of the roots holding them together, and nothing but a scorched remains is left, blackened in a pile of soot where it once stood. As you obliterate it and kill it down to farther than 0 hit points. Do you do anything with your move or bonus this turn?
With my movement, Amaruk will interpose himself between the skeletal creature and Tulka in case it turns its gaze away from the other bone grinder and towards her being injured. And he'll just put his place in between the two of them.
That brings us to Norin. One of these skeletons still stands. The other 2 have been obliterated. It is attacking Uruk, who is very close enough to you, within 30 feet. What do you do?
Everyone would see Norin's pupils dilate, and wherever his skin would be exposed, you'd see the flexing of muscles that so intense that veins would appear on some of his skin. And that is his bonus action to rage. And he is going to run up to this creature, and he's essentially going to try and tackle it.
Okay. It'll be a contested athletics then. You're trying to tackle it just to push it or tackle it to the ground?
Essentially, I'm trying to grapple it.
Okay, just actually okay, gotcha. All right, it's got a total of 11.
All right, well, I got a 14 on the die.
All right, so you have it. You're able to pin its arms at its sides and keep it immobile. Grappled.
And because of my spiked armor and my Battle Rager feature, it is going to be taking 3 damage for each turn that it is grappled.
All right, and so these behemoth blades rip into the fabric of moss, holding it together. That was 3 damage. Cutting it and sending loose bones that are non-vital but still part of its form. Uruk, what do you do?
Being struck by one of them, holding already his bone-bladed sword in one hand, he rolls with the strike and, spinning around, draws a small hooked blade, a sickle from that hangs at his waist, and completes the spin with 2 strikes in quick succession, using attack action and bonus action for offhand. And that was an 18 to hit for the sword and a 10 for the sickle.
The 18 will hit, but the 10 will not.
So that's 3 slashing damage. As he swings wildly with the smaller blade missing, and then uses that momentum to dig the longer blade into the bone with this bone-on-bone sort of crunch.
And in a battle between behemoth bone and human bone, the behemoth bone is much sharper, much harder. It's astounding how brittle the bone is as you just cut through it. It splinters and shatters as you send perhaps one of its tibia, I think that's the word for it, just careening off into the dirt. Now useless, but it still is intact, this skeleton, though the roping roots and bones themselves seem a bit more destitute than normal, despite it being, a dead body. That brings us back up to the top with Tarlok.
Tarlok sees this going on, knowing that if he strikes with an arrow, he may hit his companions. He slings the bow over his shoulder, pulls out his hand axe, walks up to this monstrosity, and takes a swing. $17?
17 hits.
And Hunter's Mark's only for ranged, right?
I believe it is only on that.
It is any
on that one. It's any weapon, but you have to move it, I believe, is your bonus action. After your mark died, you obliterated your mark earlier. So
yeah,
I believe you can move it though as your bonus action onto another living enemy within like 30 feet or whatever.
Okay, so I do.
If I'm not mistaken.
I do so as I'm walking up to it and taking a swing. So, do you want me to add just all of it together and tell you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
because Hunter's Mark just gives you bonus damage, not of any particular kind.
Ooh, 10.
10 damage is enough. And you see, so again, the Hunter's Mark manifests in this world as those salt crystals that you've actually kind of heated up onto your stone blade, and it adheres these crystals, and these crystals cause this moss to wilt and die away, and you again cut through this skeleton, and it becomes just a pile of harmless bones as the roots retract as if they were severely pained, and they snake their way back into the dirt as the moss falls away. Nothing but dust now. And now we're out of initiative as all three corpse puppets no longer have their strings governing their actions. Though there is still a mysterious tension hanging in the air. A tension that you realize comes from the fact that this great tree makes you feel as if it's just watching you, foreboding, judging you for your actions.
Emmerich will immediately turn to Tulka. That wound, let me see it. It would not be wise to walk on it without it being tended to. And he'll like kneel down. And like without waiting for actual permission, we'll begin to like poke at it, probably much to your own pain.
Yeah, and she would grit her teeth, not trying to let out any sounds of the pain. But she is not fighting you at all. Like, she is quite willing to have you do what you need to do with her leg.
Emmerich will like pull up like at the air, the mist and the fog that hangs around the trees, as if it were a solid object, and he'll like grab a piece of it, as if it were a tool on a table. And as he pulls it, like this mist will like condense down from this like sort of gaseous entity down into this like string, and it'll like chip off a small piece at the left side of his behemoth bone armor. So that just the smallest fraction breaks off. You can see like chips there as though he's done this many times. And he'll like fixate this piece of bone to the fog as if tying a needle to string. And we'll use the storm, the clouds, the mist that hangs as thread. And we'll begin to like bind your wound together with it, slowly closing it tight. You feel this like strange cold that will come over that part of your leg that's injured, though it's like a strangely comforting cold, not the biting cold that usually would come from a forest like this. This is me casting Cure Wounds. You'll gain 10 hit points back as the power of the storm will bring tight the wound and do what he can for it.
While this is going on, Norin is still holding on to the bones as it fell down, and as soon as it drops, his pupils go back to normal, and his muscles go back to what they were beforehand. He just tosses the bones onto the ground with the rest of the pile. This is the most a curse can do. I'm not worried.
We need to leave this place as soon as possible.
Be well enough to walk, Tulka. And you, Uruk, as well. Seeing that he's also sustained damage.
I am now, thank you. I can walk. And she would stand up and kind of limp a little bit, but it's much, the leg is much healed.
I've taken worse wounds. We must press on. As you say, the sooner we can get out of here, the better we will all be.
Away then from the watchful eyes that have already laid upon us, further in, perhaps to truth or perhaps to ruin. Only time will tell.
I fear the eyes grow larger and more numerous the deeper we trek. But it must be done.
Indeed.
I think at this point we can only assume young Adila has suffered a similar fate too, and he says it so unceremoniously and unpersonably. The same fate as those two girls we saw when we first came in.
And I think at that, Ilka would have involuntarily taken in some breath, like how you're right, but she doesn't want to believe it. And when you say that, it almost becomes real. And she turns to you. You may be right, but if we can stop her from being strung up like those two and become whatever it is that they will become, that will be peace enough for me.
There is still a chance that she lives.
This is true, but I shall not hold to hope. It will simply see the task done. But keep your own hope. Keep your own hopes, if that will get you through. And he sort of looks around, trying to get his bearings as to which direction is, quote unquote, deeper into this hellscape.
And with that, you will have to make either a perception or a survival check, as this is a labyrinth. Though it does not have walls, it just is an unending, self-similar fractal forest that you cannot tell north from south, east from west. Thankfully, you can, however, tell up from down, though you might worry at a point in the forest where that is no longer true.
If possible, Norn would like to assist him by looking through the undergrowth for possible game trails or paths that animals would have taken or avoided.
And so, yes, Keel, you can give advantage on this check that you're making because of the help of Norin.
Excellent. So that's a 24 on survival.
And yes, you're able to see the tracks in the earth that you made, though there are no animal or game trails in this forest, as animals are well instinctual enough to avoid these hellish places, except for a certain set of footprints that Norin would find, the cloven imprints of deer hooves, making their way these very soft tracks that wind in almost a skittish pattern that is nonsensical unless you have the mind of a deer. But yes, you're able to find your way deeper into the forest.
Urok, with the help of Norin, spotting these tracks, and then with his connection to the Aurora, I like to imagine maybe that he can somewhat get into the mind of the deer as he sees these tracks, and it sort of plays out in his enhanced vision in front of him, almost seeing a sort of spectral form of the deer as it went its track, even if that's just sort of playing out in his mind, such as the enhanced effects of the Marrow Dream. This way. And I imagine at first that he sort of begins following the winding, skittish sort of route that the deer did before he realized he's not alone, before he sort of remembers, no, he's not doing this by himself, and he's got people to lead, so he recalculates it and takes a bit more of a direct route to the final path that the deer was taking.
And so as you make your way sneaking through the underbrush, finding your footing amongst twisted roots, we'll take another bio break to refill your water skins and relieve yourself of your bodily producings, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes. whispers on the wind call and they beckon you forward.
All the way from a bio brick.
Connor, you weren't kidding when you said that the trees and the forests of Behemoth are the true villain in the setting.
Yeah, they're like
God
the
damn.
one of the central pillars of the setting is how nasty the trees are.
So
I have-
good.
I have one word. Woo!
So grim.
One might call the
I
setting
mean,
dark.
you guys are the one that, you know,
Some sort of
set food
dark
into the world.
I don't know if you can see me or not, Connor, but here you go.
The applause draws the ancient terrible monsters in the forest. They set up. Just kidding. Thank you. Yeah, I'm having fun.
Yeah.
Just have a nice decent act 2, or I guess half of this one shot.
Well, I like the fact that I had this idea about trying to piece it all together, and it just hit me like I think it's like an hour before the game or 2 hours before the game. I like how you put that together. So, as far as my backstory,
Yeah, stories whenever possible, because it's always fun when your player when one of your own characters is like, oh hey, there's my backstory being involved. It's a fun feeling, especially
Oh,
when your daughter's roped up by eldritch trees, blood flesh.
yeah.
Yep.
So
Great
brutal.
sensation. So I believe that everyone's back now, which means we can continue this Deerfoot trail. They would not get a no from people who aren't back yet because they will say no because they're not back. So I shall go regardless because I think I've got an affirmative from everybody. Yes, I do. Sweet. All right. So this trail snakes its way through the undergrowth, and it snakes its way through for some time, and you're using this for your sense of direction to get to deeper and deeper into the forest, for you see that it seems to be leading farther and farther in. However, I would like you, Uruk. Actually, no, don't even make a roll for this. You know that animals don't tarry, nor do they reside within forests. That is not a truth in this world for the basic clear of forests, and that is a observable fact. And it's in the back of your mind, even the forefront of your mind, of why it would be this far in. And maybe the answer is answered as you see a sight ahead of you, a gloom from just from the cups of trees, the canopies. Ahead of you is occurring as the trees seem to give way, and that is why I saw it, for there is no canopy overhead. A great pond of water in this deer trail goes to the water's edge.
Sorry, you were a bit robot-y and cutting in and out for me there, but I got that
All
we
right.
animals usually don't reside in forests in this setting, and so it's a bit odd that this trail's here, and we followed it up to the water's edge. The trail sort of ends at the water's edge, is that right?
Yes, exactly it. Yeah.
And is it like a running river or still water?
Still on the pond's surface and see that these leaves give you a sense of the current that is this pond, small creek feeding off of this pond that is further.
Sorry, you're still actually quite a bit roboty for me. Is it just me, or is kind of bad for everyone?
It's not
Yeah,
just
Me
you.
too.
Thinking it's probably.
Yeah, it's bad.
But I got that it's flowing water, and there's sort of leaves from the nearby trees running down the river, and trees sort of being fed through the roots by this water source, and the tracks stop at the river. Even the water in this place, the trees have claimed it. See how the roots weave themselves in.
the trees claim everything. Must fight. Fight their beckoning, their call. And you see that Tolka kind of goes into somewhat of a little trance as she's talking about not heeding their call.
They will not yet claim us. But this may not be simple to cross. And Connor, does it look like it will be shallow enough for us to try and wade across if we risked it?
It doesn't look like it would be shallow enough for you to cross it by foot, though it is small enough for you to cross it by sticking edge and continue to fall. You notice that the deer trail ends its water edge, however, and you cannot find where it goes from here.
See how the tracks end here and do not resume, either on the other side or downstream. I fear this river claimed the deer that has led us this far unknowingly.
Is the water clear or is it murky?
The water is not murky, actually very crystal clear.
Ooh.
But it's not clear enough to see the bottom of the pond. It has a bit of yellow algae growing on this, though it is sparse.
Is it the same color yellow as the moss that we saw earlier?
Yes.
Looking at it closely, kind of walking around a little bit, not too far from the party. Do I see any deer carcasses, as in like what I kind of saw when we first entered the forest?
You can give me either a perception, investigation, or a survival check.
Okay. Investigation, perception. Okay. Most of them are about the same. Ugh. 9.
So you do not see a deer carcass. But what you do see are disturbances in the ground that a fair way off from where the trail ends. And this trail is made by what seem to be non-deer feet, but that's about it. Maybe even some other coincidence of things that would cause disturbance in the ground.
Tarlock sees this, looks over at the party. There's something else over here. More tracks. Different from the deer.
Are they beast or person?
And this, you would have to give me either a lore check or a survival check.
Okay, so I'm gonna do survival. Not no 10.
And does Urok make a check as well?
He does, but that's also 10 for survival.
If I'm there and would be able to know as well, I have lore as a proficiency. So perhaps
All right.
I know, and that's a 15 on the die, which would put me at a 19.
And so, Amaruk, you wonder why it's puzzling your companions. So you find it is obviously, and this revelation troubles you, it is obviously a human foot and human tracks that lead from the water's edge further into the bowels of the great unknown.
Yeah, to him, it's like it's not just like a track in the mud. It's like so much more than that. It's like the water that's like seeped in from the river in places. The bits of water vapor and like raindrops that have fallen through the canopy and up from the river, like speak to him in ways that like simple imprints in mud cannot. And it will like tell him a story, a vague story. And he'll like see a shape. In his marrow haze of a man stepping. And I like see the mud move down and the water splash from the disturbance that was left here. And I'll kind of shake from the vision and look up towards the others. This was a man that made this. I can see it, the way the water speaks and moves as it fills and ebbs to and from this mark. They saw a man that they cannot show me the face, or tell me anymore. A human has been here, though.
And one piece of information you can glean from this Amaro Hayes kind of imprint site is that this man seemed to walk in irregular ways, and that would be described to you as seeing this man's legs bent at odd angles, with a gait that did not match a gait of a normal person, though the imprints are most assuredly that of a bare foot.
He walked with strange step, as if dancing, but not a graceful dance. A sickly dance, a dance of death. Possession of darker things that caused his stride to move in strange and mysterious ways. Not a comprehensible or clean movement. I'll say to the other.
Accursed man.
Are we following?
They seem to be the only path that we can take that would get us any further.
Urok
It's
nods.
rare
It will
that man
surely,
will.
it will
Go.
surely lead to answers. Whether they're the ones we seek or not, that's to be seen.
Indeed.
And as you follow these tracks, they make their way up the bank of the pond, up a bank further yet, and still they climb uphill and uphill. You see that the trees that are in this area are at odd angles with the ground, just confirming at how steep of a climb you're making, though at first it did not appear to be such a steep climb. But as your legs become taxed, and following these tracks, it is assured to you that this climb is a veritable climb. And a great rock, a boulder larger than 6 men combined, sits at the very peak of this hill. And on this boulder, you see a figure. This figure is dark. He's silhouetted by a bright white full moon that pierces right through the canopy, almost as if the trees themselves are bowing away from the light of this moon, and allowing you to witness it for its full glory, if not for the figure that stands at its center, atop this boulder. This figure has broad antlers that stem from its head. It would be a deer if not for its obvious not deer body. One by one, its arms unfurl from its center form. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 arms in total. And they spread each at angles from each other. It's almost arachnid in shape. But you hear a chattering of bone, the sound of teeth clanging against each other and echoing around this place. And this teeth clatter forms a rhythm. And you see that the bottommost hands seem to be drumming the sides of this figure, continuing this beat. And with this beat, the figure moves and shifts side to side. And as it shifts, you can see its legs are bent as if they were the legs of a deer. The way its ankles are high and its knees are low. Double jointed, or whatever the word is. And as this rhythm crescendos, it continues to dance, and it dances in a way that it just descends from the boulder, obscuring itself from view. Tulka, you hear, or feel rather, a warm, musky breath hang over your neck from behind you.
Does it say anything or just breathes on me?
Just this warm, moist breath. That's it.
I would spin around to face whatever this thing is.
And you are face to face with a deer skull.
Gross.
You can see its nose holes, one side chipped, the other intact. You can see these long antlers protruding from the skull. You can see a slender form beneath this skull. As this figure has somehow managed to move behind the five of you, pinning you between, not pinning, but I guess like placing you between the boulder and it now, being flanked by a rock. It extends one of its hands. You see that it's just a skeleton. The hands themselves, the bones protrude from a very tight, like mummified skin. And this hand with a finger outstretched reaches for your left ear. My sweet, you have come to me at last.
I think without hesitation, Tulka would strike this thing with her, in this case, the obsidian, the behemoth bone short sword that she carries.
And that will be an initiative roll from everybody, please.
Yeah.
And hopefully the choppiness of my voice does not interfere with what will be
You're good
this
now.
combat. Good.
Ugh. Stupid initiative.
I rolled the same number for these two initiatives in a row. How's that? What is this? And you guys like rolling the same numbers. Okay, so it's going to go in the following order. It's going to go first, the deer skull, and then it'll be either Amaruk, then Norin, and you can decide right now who's going first between the two of you.
Amaruk, what's your dex?
1.
Like +1?
Yeah.
Is it 13 or 12?
12.
Oh no.
You can just decide between the two of you.
Would you mind if I go first to grab them?
Go for it. Yeah, here you go.
Then between Tarlok and Tulka, you'll have to decide who goes next. And then lastly, Urok takes up the rear.
I have a +3 on dexterity.
Of course, so do I.
Oh, really?
It doesn't matter. I have. You go first. I will be shocked at this thing that has snuck up behind me. So I will go after you.
Only fitting.
You guys are clearly doing initiative wrong. You need to roll yourselves some 1s and 3s.
Well, we're not much better. We got 6. So that's with the +3.
Yeah, exactly.
So this 6-armed deer skull figure advances another step towards you, Tulka, and you see that it's cloaked, and the cloak kind of billows with its step, and you see the cloak itself is made out of a long yellow moss that hangs over the entirety of his form and obscures whatever resides within. And as he reaches forward with one of his 6 arms, with this mummified hand that is tipped with these long, broken nails, he reaches at your ear, your right ear, or if it was your left, it'll be your left ear. I can't remember which one I said. Let's say right for continuity purposes. He tries to rip it off of your skull. And so, as he reaches for it, I got a 14 to attack you.
That is exactly what you need to hit me.
And so you feel a strange burning sensation, along with a nasty sharp pain as you feel your ear ripped from your skull. And the sensation that follows is you've got a sense of disorientation, nausea, and dizziness as your ear is removed. You will be taking 11 points of necrotic damage from this rip, as you realize that some cursedness is still clinging to the flesh at the side of your face, boiling your flesh, causing the blood to drip and pool, and then coagulate in a big droplet, and then fall as a giant heavy raindrop. Norin, what do you do?
So Norin sees this creature remove the ear from Tulka, and he is filled with anger that someone lay a hand on someone that was just trying to help find a missing person. So he's going to go into his rage for his bonus action. And then he is going to run up and he's going to try and yank the arm away and hold on to the back of its neck with a grapple.
All right.
Off the desk again. All right, that's a 15 total.
And I got a 4 total.
He is grappled.
That he is.
That is my turn.
All right, I'm gonna confirm one thing because I am bad at Dungeons and Dragons.
He is taking the 3 damage because of the...
Yes. And so as your arms wrap around him and you begin to kind of crush him, stabbing into him with these jagged bits of behemoth bone, you see that you're ripping at the thick leathery flesh that wraps his gaunt bones, and you've been able to tear a bit at that long cloak of moss, shredding it, severing it, and revealing more of this ghastly body that I shall describe following. The body itself is strange. It would appear at first glance like a humanoid corpse that has gone through several months of decay. But then you count the number of ribs. I don't know why you would count them in this heat of the moment, but if you would, you'd see that they number one too few, and that the ribs themselves puncture through this thick leathery flesh and reveal themselves to be thick roots made of gnarled wood rather than that of bone. And this is true, it seems, of all of the bones in this man's body, replaced one by one by branches. He has no head. The head itself is just a skull. And his arms count 6, and they are attached to his body in uneven ways. And that brings us to Amaruk.
Amarok will see the creature restrained by Norin and know that they must strike while the opportunity is there, while the creature is taken in place. He'll once again let out hazy breath. A column of fog will come from his mouth, and he'll bring his fingers down across it vertically from top down to the bottom, splitting it in half, which will send it into a swirl until it forms a long, thin, cylindrical shape. And then he'll grab at the center of it, and the moment his hand touches it, it'll erupt again into thunder and lightning, a spear made of pure energy of the storm. And I'll hurl the spear at this creature. And will a 22 hit this thing?
Absolutely.
This is spiritual weapon. He'll summon a spear made of the power of the storm, of the thunder and lightning that its wrath unleashes, and the creature will take 11 force damage as the spear collides with it, sending this blast of force. And even though it pierces through the creature and out the other side, Norin will feel no pain from the spear, as its power will not affect him. And the spear will then retract from it, as if being pulled by an invisible warrior that commands it, as it will stay on the battlefield. And with my movement, I'll approach up towards the creature to try to grab its attention. And I'll use my action, since that's a spell as a bonus action for some reason, to take the dodge action, get it right up in its face and try to provoke it.
And you see that you've punctured a hole clean through this creature. And those with a sight into the aurora probably would actually see some kind of ancestral spirit grabbing hold of the spear and who is wielding it at this point, though only hidden through the veil of the aurora. Tarlok, it is your turn.
Tarlok, realizing the last battle, he just reacted out of just sheer reaction, not thinking. This time around, he sees Tolka being attacked once again, and remembering his daughters hanging from the tree. He grasps the 2 strands of their hair. Rage builds up like Norin. anger, just outright frustration. Instead of going Norn's route, he swallows it. And as he does, a spell watches over him. Zephyr's Strike. And he moves like the wind toward the beast and attacks it with his hand axe. Do you need me to read the spell?
No, I am good.
Okay. Ooh, that's good. 17 for the base. And plus, so 20. Unnatural
20 will hit this deer skull man.
Okay. And it is an extra D8 of 4. So when I also attack, it's an extra D8 of force damage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So do you may add it all together?
Yep, just add it all together.
Ooh, crap. 14 points of damage.
Okay. As you batter this creature, and again, kind of tear at this cloak, it seems to be even like reactively using this cloak almost as if some kind of shield or at least deterrent, and you cut through it and find purchase in the withered flesh underneath this, under this disguise or this covering. That was your move and bonus and attack, I believe. So that was the end of your turn.
Yep.
Tulka, you are missing an ear. Your head is spinning, and you can see that this creature is holding your ear aloft despite being grappled. And the blood that drips from your severed ear is going into the open mouth of this deer skull.
Gross.
As if dropping right down into its gullet.
Tulka would say, "Do what you will to me, but I will not join you." And as she says that, she is going to jab her short sword right into the belly of this deer man thing in front of her that Norn is grappling. And I rolled a 16 to hit.
16 will hit.
Okay. And so that will be a total of 16 points of damage as the short sword is buried in its belly.
And it does so, and you twist, and as you retract your blade, where you would expect blood to be, as you've punctured these organs that would be in a normal man, you find only a thick yellow sap to come on the edge of your blade. Did you roll your sneak attack damage on this as well?
That was 7 points of that was sneak
Okay,
attack
cool.
damage.
Yeah. Just want to make sure you get that because you are eligible for it. Yeah, awesome.
Is it
Do you
still
have any other?
standing?
Yes, absolutely.
So as my move action, because I'm also mobile, I am, not that he can really do anything, but just in case, she's moving away from it, backing up, but I do not provoke attacks of opportunity. So I am getting...
Just so everyone's aware, grapple just reduces the speed to 0. Doesn't do anything else.
Yeah, I have, mobility. I am... Not mobility, it's called whatever, mobile. So
yeah, the feet.
Yeah. So I will back away so that it can't hit me again, but he does not get an attack of opportunity.
All right, and you flee the scene. How far back do you go? 10 feet, 15, 20, 30, 100? Well,
no,
100.
I would go... okay, I have my movement is 40. I think I would go back... probably 40 feet, but I don't want to go towards that thing that was on the ledge, that silhouette we saw. I want to go in a different, imagine like if they were here and here, I would go like a triangular point so that I
Sure,
would...
yeah. Almost like perpendicular to it all.
Yes, yeah.
All right. And so you retreat a bit to kind of gather yourself as you still come to the realization and that you're missing an ear now. Uruk, it is your turn as you see this beast, this horror, being grappled by the resolute Norin and being butchered by the witch hunter himself, Tarlok, and beaten up with a aurora weapon of Amaruk.
Uruk thinks of his home region, the Grey Walk Mile. He thinks of the small creatures that dwell there, the rodents, and how they swarm. And Amaruk, if he was to see in his peripheral vision, connected to the aurora as he is, just like Uruk, would see rats, like this sort of spirit forms of rats emerging from everywhere and swarming over Uruk's body. And then the rest of the group would just simply see Uruk's body from his head and from fragments of his sword just starting to fall away and fragment and break off and fall down to the ground. And as they're falling, once they hit the earth, each of those segments becomes a rat, as I use wild shape to transform into a swarm of rats.
Awesome.
And the rats will swarm over to occupy the same space as this creature, and sort of start climbing up his legs, his various limbs and things like that. But that would be my action and then move. So that's it for this turn.
The deer skull is holding this ear aloft, and as the blood trickles into his deer maw, all four of you would feel a great weight. So everyone but Tulka would feel a great weight that happens in your ankles and then in the soles of your feet, as you feel a lightheadedness, as you feel all the blood in your body being literally forced down from your head, from your chest, and into your feet as you feel your feet swell. I need all four of you please to make strength saving throws.
Just so I know you're aware, I have advantage on that because rage.
Yep.
9 for Uruk.
So everyone passes but Uruk. So Uruk, perhaps it is more impactful on you, for you are not one being but several, and so the blood can easily pool, and as it does so, you feel the bottoms of your feet, and in your case, Uruk, your many feet, begin to rupture and split as the blood itself actually bursts from your feet into the ground. This is going to be 12 points of necrotic damage to you, Uruk, and 6 points of necrotic damage to the other three of you. And as well, this sudden pain in your feet makes it so that you, Uruk, you cannot take reactions until your next turn.
Speaking of reactions, I have one. So as I'll feel this like pull from this creature's like dark magic, pulling his blood down, as if to rupture it onto the ground and spill it from him. Like reach out a hand, and like the spear that's like impaled through the creature will like rush back into him and like explode out in like this column of lightning around him, and then like blast back at this creature. So I have a reaction as a Tempest Cleric, where if I'm damaged within 5 feet of an enemy, I can make it make a Dexterity saving throw.
Sweet. All right. So grappling does not have any effect on Dex saves. So this is going to be a 4. I feel that the pinning of this is still helpful in that way.
Alrighty, so I'm going to use another one of my Tempest Cleric abilities, my Channel Divinity. When I deal lightning damage, I can cause the roll to automatically deal max damage instead of rolling for it, which I'll do that. So it'll take 16 lightning damage, as like the spiritual weapon will like erupt into this column of lightning, which will like breach onto this creature, sending sparks crackling through it as it dares to strike at me with its dark magic. I'll return blow. The Marrow Haze, granting the storm extra power against this creature.
And the lightning courses through this being as if it were a tree being struck during a storm. You can see that the veins of its arms kind of becoming a thick black as the lightning itself grounded at the end by the soles of this creature's strange feet. And you smell the smell of singed wood, and a bit of smoke rises in the air from this. And that is Deerskull's turn. We go to Norin.
So, I would like to use my main action to utilize my grappler feat. Basically, we make another grapple check, and if I succeed, the creature is now restrained, as am I.
All right. So this is contested athletics.
Yes, sir. You got to beat 21.
Well, will a 5 do?
No.
No.
So, with him holding on to the back of the neck and the arm of this creature, he swiftly moves and gathers up the wooden arms of this creature and forces it down to a knee, as he does as well. And he's going to use a bonus action to make an unarmed strike with his spike armor. And is going to... let me see here. Let me just double check the restraint thing.
Basically, your attack has advantage, but then it also has disadvantage. So
Yeah.
it's all just is a wash.
Yep.
So give me a straight attack roll.
That is going to be a modified 20.
That will hit. How
All
much
right.
damage do you do?
I deal 4 damage as I just jam a little bit more spikes into him.
And this punctures more of this gaunt, dusty flesh, that more sap leaks out of it. That is your entirety of your turn,
Correct.
because you can no longer move. Amaruk, it is your turn.
Amarok, seeing the creature held even stronger by Norin, the grasp taking root and like bringing it down, will sense time for opportunity. The like column of lightning that surrounded him in this flash will like recoalesce down back into the spear, which will then like thrust forward, guiding Amarok's hand rather than vice versa, as if it had a will of its own. As a bonus action, I'll have my spiritual weapon attack again.
Okay.
Which will be a 19 to hit for 5 force damage.
And it connects, doing this damage, slashing more and puncturing more these gaping holes in this seemingly undead creature.
And then as the spear will like puncture through this thing's chest again, like sending this like rupture of electricity, the storm will gather around Amarok even greater and like call down for the sky to smite this creature, and through the canopy of the trees, like this bolt of lightning will like strike down at it as it's being held, which is me casting another guiding bolt at it as my primary action, which is actually because I have advantage being right next to it and it being restrained, will be a crit.
All right.
So this
You
is gonna
can
really
then
fucking
roll all
hurt.
those dice. Double. Oh, yeah, just it'll be 8d6 now instead of 4d6.
Yeah, that's gonna be 33 radiant damage as the
You-
holy power of the storm will call down upon it.
And you can describe to me then, Jeff, how this Deerskull forest spirit becomes obliterated.
as the like lightning spear in its chest will continue to like radiate this power from around it, outside of it. Like the lightning will just begin to like steadily burn from the center of it outwards, like lightning continuing to course, weakening it, making this wood like brittle and weak. And then as the lightning calls down from the sky, the bolt of holy thunder falling down upon it, the brittle bone and wood of this creature, already weakened from the prior burns and electricity, will just like begin to crumble and disintegrate, falling into dust, as like the heat from the radiant lightning will be too much for its weakened form to bear. Falling, cracking into pieces. The edges of it will like begin to like scatter and burn into small bits of ash and dust, as there's little left of this creature outside of scraps of wood.
And so what finally rests on this pile of soot and ash is the deer's skull, now limp and unliving, I guess dead or unmoving, unanimated, on this pile of soot. And the arm that was holding the ear was the last to disintegrate. And as it clutches, the base of the arm begins to disintegrate, working its way up to the hand until finally it all scatters as dust, and the ear itself falls limply and somewhat messily onto the packed earth that is this forest. And now we're out of initiative as the wind carries this soot off into the distance. And this soot flies into spiral shapes and moves its way unnaturally up into the canopy of the trees and down again until it stirs almost like a little dust devil or a tornado, but tiny, at the top of the boulder that was atop this hill. And it just seems to stir there. And then finally it dissipates.
Norn.
What do you
would
what do
pick
you
up
guys do?
the ear, and he'd walk it over to Tulka, and he'd say, "You at least want to have all of your pieces together, if not being whole."
She would grimace a bit at that, but then realize that you're right and that she would not want to leave any piece of her behind in this place. So she would gingerly take it and shove it into one of her pouches at her belt. And then she would proceed to take a mostly clean leather strip and tie it around her bleeding head and cover the remnants of what used to be her ear.
Amarok will like fall down onto one knee, using his hand to like steady himself up as he falls, like breathing super heavy from exertion, exhaustion at calling like so much energy forth from the aurora. It's difficult to like contain that much power, and it wears on him. And this like lightning spear that's like in his hand as he falls will like dissipate first into a cloud, a storm cloud, and then like fade away into mist and then nothing. He'll just continue before like finally steadying himself up enough to stand. And he'll look again over to the rest of you. Is everybody well? It was a dangerous creature.
You would notice that Urok is not present at this very moment, at least. That final blow scattered all of the rats that he was in the form of, scattered them about the scene, some atop the boulder and just all over the place. And as you ask that, Amaruk, with your sort of wavering connection to the aurora right now, from your aurora fatigue, as it were, you can see a faint glow in these rats that everyone else can see as normal rats, as they sort of emerge back and coalesce into a sort of swarm again, and then finally turn back into Urok's form crumpled on the ground.
And in your brief moments of being discorporated rats atop that boulder, you would see, though, through the sense of one singular rat, amidst a colony of others, the brief sense of something being on the other side of that boulder, a scent that caught your nose as this little rat, a scent of decay and death, but not of movement or activity, or alivedness, or even undeath itself.
The boulder. The boulder. He would splutter as he sort of as his crumpled form began to move and stir, and he would point over, try and get himself up to his feet. Something lies beyond. I fear it. I fear we're not done yet. And he begins moving immediately straight behind there, seemingly no care for his own wounds that he may have taken, or how anyone else is. He's got the scent, as it were, and is making his way there immediately.
And Urok, as you make this last climb, you turn the corner, and you see behind this boulder is a grisly sight. You see various pine cones, stones, branches, weaved together and amassed in almost like a circle at the base of this boulder, hidden on this other side of it. And at the center of this ring of tree products is a corpse of a woman. Though, as you look further, you can see that the corpse of this woman does not seem right. The left side of her face does not match the right side of her face, nor the neck with her shoulders, with her left breast to her right torso, with her left leg to her right leg, to her right knee, to her right foot, all the way all across her body. You see that these thin filamentous roots stitch this body together, though this body itself is slacked, leaning, its head, lulled to the side. And you see that the only part that seems to be missing with this kind of lackingness is the right ear.
Which ear did it take from Tulga?
The right ear. And upon making this discovery, and you recognize along with this discovery that the majority of the parts of this body, especially the eyes and the face, that left half, resemble that girl you were sent to find the fate of, Alida or Adila, I can't remember which one it was. And there is her fate, sitting against the boulder, dead, though desecrated and destroyed and utterly carnated, if that's even a word. We end our session and we will go around one by one and you can describe to me what your epilogue is at the end of this story, what you do after making this scene, or not the scene, after experiencing this sight. And you can be as liberal with this epilogue as you wish, with time lapses galore. And we will start off with the person to make this sight, if you would wish, Keel. Urok.
Yeah. We see only, I think, a matter of days later, back in the village of Hanged Hill, we see Urok in the tent of Elder Bone Grinder Amudak. They're both there, sipping on their marrow tea, sort of ritualistically prepared it together for this sort of spiritual meeting. And he tells her of, by this point, I think the general recount of what happened and the fate of Adela and everything had already been told to her sort of as a group, but this is him catching up with her afterwards. And he says, Do you see? Do you see now? The vision shows that he must die. The village will not be safe until it is made so. And Elder Bone Grinder nods reluctantly. So it shall be. And you with him. You will both see the noose, for it was you who were to watch over him and guide him, as with the whole group. And with that, Uruk nods without any issue or hesitation. That is correct and that is right. And he finishes his marrow tea. And as he steps out from the tent to go and find Norin to tell him of the fate of both of them, for what happened in that forest, he sees once more, for one last time, his grandfather upon the distant mountain through his enhanced marrow dream vision. And he just smiles, knowing that he'll be with him shortly.
Little round of applause, and then we will move to Tarlok. You can give me, please, David, the ending of Tarlok's story in this one shot.
I think Tarlok immediately after the battle, at first, he feels this kindred spirit with Tolka, as if she was one of his own daughters, and looks over as she's bleeding profusely. He grabs from his satchel a small amount of salt and other herbs. The one strand he did not grab in the entire journey was his wife, Inku. He takes that strand, puts it in the salt packet, walks over to Tuka, smiles at her. This is going to hurt. And slaps it to the ear that is missing. As he does, he casts Cure Wounds upon her, healing what he can. After which, the salt fades away. The strand is left. He puts it away. Looks at her. It will be okay. Walks up to the boulder. Looks down. Silently starts crying. As time passes, he realizes that his two daughters are still in the tree, wanting and urging and needing to see rest, a sense of closure. He manages to find another group, just as crazy as he is, to go and try to rescue his daughters from that awful tree, that awful place. Several times he has tried, but the tree is not there, nor is the daughters. Whether he is confused to where they're at or it moves, who knows? He eventually just gives up, but does not give up the idea that monstrosities and horrors must not exist in the world. And that's it.
A little round of applause for you. That was an excellent epilogue as well. We will hop over to Tulka. Karen, if you will, give us your epilogue.
So Tulka, having been healed as best as it was done, will never be the same. She's never been whole. She wears her hair long on the side to hide what's missing. And we see her a few days later back in the village as she approaches the elders in their tent when they're having one of their councils. And she interrupts them, and she goes right up to their circle, and she digs into her pouch, and she pulls out this bloodied, rotting ear, and she throws it down on the ground in the midst of them and says, there is your sign that I am not to be a listener. You were wrong. And with that, she stamps out of their tent and heads towards her own.
A round of applause as well for our not listener. That was an excellent epilogue. Thank you. We'll move on to Norin. How does he close the story?
He closes this story by not staying long in Hanged Hill. He didn't find the body of his sister or even know if she was out there in the first place. So he packs up all the things that he can in his tent and continues to go out and search for her. Not advertently escaping the noose, but he just continues to search. And I think after what would be a couple months, a certain body would appear on Amarok. Is that David's character? Or did I get that completely wrong?
Tarlock.
A very specific body would appear in front of Tarlock's tent, and it would be the half-sister. He discovered it and felt it would be best to deliver it to you. And since he was already cursed, he didn't see the harm in using his spikes to get up the tree this time.
Bravo, a little round of applause for you, Connor, for that excellent epilogue. And that felt like a little clap on the back for me, but I swear, no, his name is Connor as well, not just me. Lastly, as we wrap this entire game up, we move on to Jeff with the closing scene of Amarok. If you will, Jeff.
So we see Amarok walking through an endless marsh. There's no trees, merely swamp on the ground, and a thick fog that hangs in the air. At first, we can only see his silhouette, and hear the slight squishing of mud as he steps further and further through. There's a light drizzle of rain that continues endlessly through a forever overcast sky. A cold yet gentle darkness that hangs forever on this place. And then we see it start to fall away. The clouds break and sun comes through. The rain stops and the marsh dries as his marrow haze comes to an end again. And he'll frown at the light as he comes to and sobers up from its magic, the connection from the aurora. waning again. And it'll see like the torchlights and the bonfires of the camp, and it'll like shirk away from it, as if a fearful beast from the fire. He'll continue back away from it, and he'll take another sip of the marrow tea, falling again into the stormy haze of the tea, and will continue to do so until again it falls away. And this time he'll shirk further away from the light, as we see this like time lapse of days into weeks that go by. Amarok will go further and further from the camp, like moving his tent and his supplies away from the light and away from the sun, closer and closer to the woods. As the connection to the aurora strengthens, his ability to like stand in the sun and the light continues to wane. It becomes more harsh on his skin, more damaging to his eyes. Seems to be a blight upon him more so than the woods ever were. And he'll continue into this like marrow tea obsession, forever returning to that like gentle storm at any opportunity, continuing to move further and further away from Hanged Hill and its people there, until eventually we see another fog-ridden place. This time it's like the tree-infested woods, the dark canopy covering any sign of sun. The marrow haze like fully taken him, lost forever in its comfort. And he'll wander the woods, somehow never succumbing to the curse, but never knowing again what it's like to be a man. The strange, like, gentle evil of the woods, more bearable than the normal plight of mankind and the people that reside there, and their willingness to tread in places of light and dark. And he'll continue ever onwards, the wandering storm in the woods, lost to the haze, unwilling to let it go, and unwilling to return to man, yet unwilling to die either. An endless and cruel fate that he brought upon himself.
And bravo, another round of applause for Jeff for that killer ending. And with that, this Behemoth game is over. The Behemoth game known as, or titled rather, Our Flesh is One. And with that, I will bid everyone watching and whoever will watch this a good night as we have this game come to a close. And so thanks guys for watching and thanks guys for playing. This was an awesome game and you guys really took the setting of Behemoth and just like absorbed it and really just emanated it. It's for that I'm very, very happy and thankful. You just picked up on all the good stuff and yeah. My little baby setting is a beautiful thing when it's in your hands. So thank you very much. And with that being said, I will click on this stop broadcast button and we can all go our own ways.